back to More Than Gardening. Today I am canning my salsa. If you have been following along here on YouTube, on my shorts or Instagram, you would have seen quite a few harvests so far of tomatoes, peppers. I pulled my onions about a month ago, and I've been getting all of my cilantro harvested and ready for this big canning day. Salsa is one of my favorite ways to use my tomatoes and my peppers from my garden, and canning it allows me to make a really big batch of it at one time and preserve it to make it shelf stable. That way I can enjoy it all year long. I'm canning the salsa today. I'm gonna take you along with me and show you my recipe, show you the process. I think if you're new to canning, you're gonna see this is probably a lot easier than you expected it to be. And I hope that this video shows you that canning does not have to be super hard, super intimidating. I hope it encourages you to try canning if you haven't done it before. So with that said, let's get straight into it and start canning up this salsa. This is just a quick look at all of the tomatoes, the onions and the peppers. I've got jalapenos and poblanos. I got some garlic over here that was purchased at the store. I did not grow garlic this year. I'm gonna try again, but for next season, but for now, store-bought. And then some limes. And then I've got my first canner load of jars, which is 9 pint jars, 9 bands, and then 9 new lids. There's debate about if you can reuse lids or not. I prefer not to. I think canning takes so much time, so much effort, so much valuable produce from your garden. I don't want to risk not having a good seal, so I use new lids every single time. Over here to the canner, this is a 21.5 quart water bath canner. I will link it in the description of this video. I love this one. It comes with a lid and it comes with a rack inside. If you are totally new to canning, just to give you like a quick little summary, water bath canning and there's pressure canning. Food that is really acidic, like salsa, is gonna be water bath canned. It only needs to get up to that boiling temperature of 212 degrees. If you're doing a low acid food, such as your meats, your stocks, green beans, carrots, potatoes, things like that, you do have to pressure can. If you're interested in learning how to pressure can, let me know in the comments and I'll do another video on that. But today is all about water bath canning because that is all we have to use for salsa. So step 1 is filling your canner. I like to fill my water bath canner about halfway with warm water. This is enough water so that once the pint jars go in the canner, they're covered by at least an inch of water, which is required for water bath canning. And then I also like to add a little bit of white vinegar. I have really hard water here, and if I don't add the vinegar, the jars come out of the canner really dirty. The lids look like they're covered in almost like a salty residue, so I always like to add the vinegar to keep them clean. And then I just turn the heat on and start heating up my canner. Once I get that going, I wash my jars, lids, and rings with warm soapy water. Some people might say this is overkill because you're also going to see that we're going to sterilize the jars in the canner in boiling water, but I just like to start with all really clean supplies. Canning can be really dangerous if you don't do it the right way, if you're not really hygienic with it. So I just think it's better safe than sorry. Clean everything with soapy water. Then I'm also going to be sterilizing my jars. Like I said, I like to put them in the water bath canner and just let them heat up while it's heating up. To sterilize them properly, they are going to have to be in boiling water for 10 minutes. They will definitely get at minimum 10 minutes here because you'll see it takes a while to get the salsa going. Now, a lot of people also say you need to boil the lids. However, I'm using new lids from Ball and they do not recommend you boil the lids. They only recommend washing them in warm soapy water. So make sure you check the information on whatever manufacturer you're buying your lids from to see if you actually need to boil them or not. Now I'm moving on to prepping my ingredients to make my salsa, and the first thing is lining a baking sheet with some foil, and then I'm going to get the oven preheating to a broil. And that oven is what's going to help get the skin off of our fresh tomatoes. I'm working with both fresh tomatoes and frozen tomatoes, so I'm going to show you how I work with both of them. But starting with the fresh ones, I just wash them really good first, and then I cut off the tops or core them and slice them in half. I like to put them face down on that baking sheet. Then when they go in the oven on that broil setting, the skins will char really nicely and slowly separate from the tomatoes, making the skins really easy to remove. Now, if you're working with frozen tomatoes like me, you can bring them out of the freezer, let them thaw a little bit, and then the skins just peel off really easily and really nicely. You can see here, they just peel right off. And I really like to freeze my tomatoes if they're coming in kind of slow and I'm not getting enough at one time to do a full batch of whatever I'm canning. And then as you can see, it's so easy to just remove the skins this way. So I'm going to go through all of these, remove the skins. And I'm also lining them on the baking sheet because putting them in the broil setting with the other ones gets them a nice char, and then the salsa has more of like a charred salsa feel, and we really like that depth of flavor. Once your entire baking sheet is lined, you can throw them in the oven, and it usually takes about 5 to 7 minutes, but I just keep my eye on it, and once I see the skin is charred and lifting from the tomatoes, I pull them out. While the tomatoes are in the oven, I like to prep all my other ingredients, and rather than chopping everything up really small, I like to just do a rough chop and add things to a blender and let the blender do the rest of the work for me. So for my recipe, I like to use serranos, jalapenos, and poblanos for the peppers, but if you like a spicier salsa, you can definitely add spicier peppers, or if you like it a little more mild, I recommend removing the serranos and the jalapenos. I will leave my entire recipe in the description of this video, and I do want to note that this blender full makes about 4 jars, and a full canner load is 9 jars, so we're going to use just over 2 blender fulls to make an entire canner batch of salsa. And I will also add that this salsa recipe is really good fresh too, and you can just make it in the blender and pour it into jars and skip the whole canning process if you want some fresh salsa. If you're growing cilantro this year and you're looking for a way to keep it fresher longer, I highly recommend that once you harvest it, you wash it, and while it's still wet, wrap it up in a paper towel and then put that in a Ziploc bag in the fridge, and it will stay fresh for a really long time. Usually by the time I'm done filling my blender with all my other veggies, the tomatoes are done in the oven, and you can see they're ready to go by that nice char that is on the skins there. So I'm just going to use my tongs and load the hot tomatoes into the blender until it's totally full. The tomatoes that came from frozen are super easy. You just pick them up and drop them in. And then the ones that have skins on them, you just need to carefully separate the skins from the tomato, and then the tomatoes get loaded into the blender alone. You do not want to mix those skins in there. The texture can get really weird. And then I repeat this process usually 2 times, sometimes 2.5 to get a full canner load, because again, the blender only makes about 4 jars worth of salsa. And once the blender is full of tomatoes, I'm adding some fresh lime juice along with some spices. And again, the entire recipe for the salsa will be in the description below. Then I just blend everything up to the desired consistency that I like. I like mine a little thicker so I don't blend it too much, and then I just bring it to a boil on the stove and let it simmer for 10 minutes. After that's done simmering, I remove my glass jars from the boiling water. Again, these need to boil for at least 10 minutes to be sterilized. And be really careful when you're removing these jars because you'll have to dump the water out of them, and it is really hot and the steam can burn you, so make sure you turn down the heat from your canner while you're doing this. Also, you want to be moving your hot jars onto a towel rather than directly onto your countertop. One, your countertop is likely cold, and a hot jar on a cold countertop could cause the jars to crack, and you also don't want to ruin your countertops if it is sensitive to heat. Next, I'm just adding a funnel on top and then slowly pouring the salsa into the jars. This is going to go to a 1/2 inch headspace. That 1/2 inch headspace measurement comes from tested recipes from Ball, but I would like to point out that this specific salsa recipe is not a USDA Ball canning tested recipe. It is very similar to a lot of ones they do. This is the recipe I use and have been using, and has been perfectly fine for me. But please, anytime you're canning, can at your own risk. And if you don't like using recipes outside of ones that are tested, I will leave a link to a book in the description for a bunch of tested canning recipes that you can use and know are 100% safe. Now, I ran out of salsa a little sooner than I wanted to, and I'm going to end up having 6 full jars. So here all I'm doing is stealing from my 5th jar that wasn't fully to the top of that 1/2 inch and making sure those 6 jars that will go in the canner are at the right headspace. Next, I'm using my debubbler tool to get any trapped air out of the salsa. After you do this, you'll probably see that the salsa will lower a little bit, and you'll have to add a little bit more to get it back up to that 1/2 inch headspace. You're going to want to wipe the rims clean. You cannot have anything on the rims of your jars or you're not going to get a good seal. I like to use white vinegar. You can also use just plain water, but I find that the white vinegar cuts through any dirt or debris a little bit better than water does. Then you can just apply your clean lids and your bands. And with your bands, you only want to screw them on fingertip tight. If they are too loose, they won't hold the lid down in the canner. And if they are too tight, they could buckle. So just do 1 twist, no more, no less. Once all of your lids and bands are on, you can load them up into your canner. And again, do this very carefully because the water is going to be really hot and you don't want to burn yourself from the steam. Once they're all in the canner, I like to check to just make sure the water is covering them by at least 1 inch. If it's not, you're going to want to add more water. Then I put the lid on, bring the heat back up, and once they're at a rolling boil, I'll start my timer for 20 minutes. When the 20 minutes is up, I shut the heat off, let them sit in the canner for 5 minutes, and then I remove them. Again, these hot jars are going to want to go onto a towel rather than directly onto your counter. And these are all going to sit for 12 to 24 hours while the jars cool and while the lids seal. During this time, you're going to hear the lids popping, and don't be alarmed because that is a good sound. It means they are sealing. The next day, it's been over 12 hours and all of my salsa has sealed, so I'm going to show you what they're looking like. I went in and canned a few more batches yesterday after I stopped recording, but basically what you're looking for to make sure that your jars have sealed successfully, you want to take off these bands. You're not going to store your jars with the bands on. If you do, you run the risk of, if you have a good seal when you store it and then later it comes off on the shelf, and then if it has the pressure of this band on it, it could reseal, but it's not shelf stable at that point if it comes unsealed, because air can get in, then you create an environment for bacteria to grow. So you really don't want the band on for that reason. And also, if this were to come unsealed, you want to be able to notice it pretty quick. You don't want to wait until something smells bad or looks weird. You just want to see it. So you do not need to store them with the bands. Now, the first thing you can do when you take them off to check for your seal is just push in the middle of the lid. It's concave down, and then when I press on it, it doesn't move. It stays exactly where it is. So that is sign number one that I have a good seal. The next thing you can do is just pick it up by the lid alone. So I'm coming in here with my hands and I'm only holding it pretty much by the lid, and I can also flip it upside down and it doesn't come off. So this is a good seal. Once you go through and do that with all of your jars, again, remove all of the rings. You can wash these. I like to wash them because I have hard water. I did add vinegar to the water bath in the beginning, which helps with that mineral, build up. But I still like to wash them to make sure they're really clean before going on the shelf. And then it's another good check to make sure the seal is good. After they're all washed, I'll go through here and write Salsa 824 on all of them. That way I know that they were canned in August of 24. And then they are shelf stable and ready to go in my pantry for a long, long time and to enjoy until I have more fresh salsa next summer. And that is it. That is how you can your salsa. That's how you check for a good seal. I hope if you're gearing up to try canning for the first time, I hope this video is all you need to get started. Canning is a really great way to preserve food. And if you want to see more videos like this and what else I preserve from my garden, definitely let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this and want to see more videos like this, and I will do more. Also, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Follow along on Instagram at More Than Gardening, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.